It is your buddy, peace, and harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we are zooming in and focusing in on a very important topic that comes to assisting you in understanding a relationship with someone who is psychopathic. Someone who is operating with a different set of wiring and firing within the brain itself, which causes a certain deficit of empathy and conscience. Conscience is the ability to gauge the difference between right or wrong behavior. It is to be able to make a good judgment. It is to be able to understand what is right or wrong, to have that intelligence. Excuse me, I was something in my eye there for a moment. Okay. And it is to understand really the societal norms and what they are, observe them, and respect them without question. So things like, not hurting somebody, not breaking the law, not stealing, not cheating on your wife. These are, situations where morality is called into place. And this takes the presence of what we call a conscience. It is the higher learning. It is the prefrontal cortex, which is engaged in the moral judgment centers. And there is a disconnect and a disengaging and an inactivity in certain brain centers of psychopathic individuals through various studies who particularly looked at brain scans of incarcerated individuals or followed perhaps studies of children, through 3 through 23, and studied their brain activity and then their propensity or not to become engaged in criminal activity. And so when we understand a little bit more of this and what conscious really means, so you have to understand really what consciousness means and what it is to have a conscience, to do right or wrong, to understand what is moral or immoral. And an important aspect, I would say, of looking at and understanding whether you are in the presence of a psychopath there's a term that's been coined that our researchers have denoted, and journalists who also have interviewed these individuals. They feel like they are drinking from a fire hose. To feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, there's an emotional feeling of overwhelm. There's an energetic vibration which you can feel the tension seething off of them. There is a disconnect or a cognitive dissonance between what they say and what they do. It is the persona mask going on and another being taken off and put on. And so you have this disconnect or incongruency between what they say and what they do. In other words, they'll say that they're very easygoing, they don't really care about anything, yet then a couple days earlier, they have made behaviors and statements to the contrary. There's a disconnect between what they say about themselves and then what they say about themselves in other situations. So there's an inconsistency of personality. And another viewer had mentioned that, they feel that they were sort of hypnotized or intoxicated. So this is another key sort of energetic feeling when you are around someone who is psychopathic, is the feeling that you are hypnotized. So you feel this, it's beyond an obsession. You feel this feeling that you can't pull yourself away from them. There's something inextricably attractive. You're engaged. There's something in their eyes. And those individuals who have been through psychopathy relationships or experiences with these types of people have understood it now, that they see a glare, a coldness, an evil, a sort of black hole that in the psychopathic stare or glare. And you can do research on that, and it's very interesting because, especially in the work of Thomas Sheridan, who has also had a lot of experiences with these individuals, he talks about the psychopathic smirk. So it's where their face is smiling, but their eyes are not. There is no emotion. There is no, sort of spark of light in their eyes. So you see a real disconnect between their face and then their eyes. So like if someone is smiling, their whole face lights up, that's their emotions. When someone is psychopathic, their eyes will stay straight. And then you'll see this fake smile. So if you look oftentimes at politicians or other people who are known psychopaths, you can see this very clearly once you study it and are experienced. The other thing that is very important to understand, not only is this sort of fire hose effect, and while you kind of feel like you're being blasted emotionally, and a lot of people will just give into it. They'll give in because of this emotional overwhelm. There's an energy that sort of takes you under, along with the look, and people, and of course there are the statements where they plant seeds of how they want you to behave. For example, they will give you commands. I am obsessed. I am addicted. I am infatuated. They'll be using highly emotionally charged words and statements to get you to be entangled and ensnared in this emotional trap, which is the setting up of the love bombing and the deception. The deception is extremely profound. Most people, professionals, unless they have studied or understood this type of person, they will find themselves also, forgetting what they're, just forgetting their bearing, and not observing information that is congruent with the truth, and they'll be swept up with this hypnotic feeling or being entranced, or as another viewer has stated, feeling intoxicated. So these are great words for you to understand. And, they have, once you know it to be the case, so once you've gone through the experience, you've exposed them, and then you've seen the mask of sanity drop, you're dealing with an interspecies predator. You're dealing with someone who is highly immoral, criminal. They may have a rap sheet, but yet they appear very different. So you're like, I could never fit this two and two together. And also, it is also to look at various studies, and the science of it is that there's a disconnect between their emotional connection to words. So the way that words, and then the studies have been shown in terms of looking at criminals. There was a penitentiary in Wisconsin where researchers looked at and interviewed inmates about their recollection of their previous crimes, whether it was, obviously it was something serious enough to give them time in a penitentiary. And people who tested highly psychopathic versus those people who did not oftentimes use the past tense when they were referring to the incident. So in other words, and using a lot of cause and effect. In other words, showing emotional detachment. And instead of, rather than, getting in the moment and being in the present moment, they're showing emotional detachment and cause or effect. And they'll use a lot of ums and ahs in order to plan what they're going to say next. And I will get the reference for these studies if you're interested. And, they'll also describe it very intellectually, as if it was a logical outcome of a plan. I did this because, and they'll see that there's kind of like the air of that there was nothing wrong with it, but it was purposeful, just to or instrumental to what they needed. So they don't see anything wrong with the instrumentality of their immoral acts or their crimes. And, they tend to also view others as instrumental in this way. So, when you look at this, the admission of guilt is very easy to understand when you're dealing with someone who is cunning like this. In other words, the words that they use the word syntax is the language from which they are stating this. And I can pull up the study right now. I think it would be important to understand the language styles of someone who is psychopathic. The language styles are where you look at it and it's a telltale sign, because it's an unconscious. It's something that seeps through the mask for people who are studied. So if you have found yourself in a situation where you're up against this, or this is a family member, or in your workplace or in your community, and you need to protect yourself, or, you know, you need to understand this now, given the, you know, recent transpiring of events in your life where you've had relationships, you've been married for several years. It's very important to understand this. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information here about psychopaths, namely that they're known to be very manipulative and wily, which means sly and cunning, more than the average Joe, basically. And scientists have shown that they unconsciously betray themselves, according to science, who have looked at patterns in convicted criminals' speech as they describe their crimes. And just as an interesting study, I would stay tuned for this, researchers interviewed 52 convicted murderers, 14 of them ranked as psychopaths, according to the psychopathy checklist, the 20-item hair assessment, and asked them to describe their crimes in detail. And then using computer programs to analyze what the men said, this study was related to the males in this study. So the researchers found that those with highly psychopathic scores showed a lack of emotion and spoke in terms of cause and effect when describing their crimes, and focused their attention on basic needs such as food, drink, money, etc. And, you know, while people have conscious control over their words, like nouns and verbs, this is not the case for a lot of the words that we use, including little functional words like to and the, etc., as well as the tense we use for our verbs. In other words, is it present or is it past? Is it I like you or is it I liked you? Is it I trust you, you know, or is it like, you know, I'm loyal to you or I was loyal to you? So that's called the tense of words, of course. And so it was Jeffrey Hancock. I just want to give credit to the right person here, who is a lead researcher and an associate professor of communications. And this is one that is done at Cornell University. And he, you can really see the psychological dynamics at play when you look at this. And so not only are they profoundly selfish and lack this emotion and lack of conscience, but when you he states that after you are engaged with them, you feel this. So this researcher is also testifying to the feeling or experience, which hopefully, I mean, you will resonate with, of being fire hosed. So sometimes people who are very strong, after being with them, it looks like they've had their energy drained. I mean, these people are that emotionally pulling of the good, positive energy out of you. And then this is very interesting. It states how their words give them away. And to examine the emotional content of these individuals' psychopathic speech, Hancock and his colleagues looked at a number of factors, including how frequently they described their crimes using the past tense. And I think you'll find this very interesting. The use of past tense can be an indicator of psychological detachment, and the researchers found that psychopaths used it more than the present tense when compared with the non-psychopaths. So there's a lot of disinfluences that, in other while they're trying to create their story. And so and then very interesting, when they're kind of doing that pause, the psychopaths will oftentimes be very paused in their speech. And it's when they're putting the mask of sanity on. That's a very good way to look at it. In other words, they're still trying to fit in. They're consciously keeping everything intact on the outside while they're cunning and manipulative on the inside. And so also, and so in other words, when you're looking at the past, so in other words, you're disengaging from the act itself and taking responsibility and accountability. So it's very interesting when you engage in this. You know, to give an example, let's just say someone is asking you, you know, are you prepared for this test? You know, are you ready? Did you study? So they're asking you a question of how you feel. And then they will say, you know, I prepared for it. So rather than I feel prepared, there's a very, very slight distinction, but you will see that this is kind of like the unconscious statements that will give them away, especially when you are confronting them and, asking about, whether they did something or not. You'll see an emotional attachment. They will not be living in the present. They'll be using words that are very disfluent or disconnect from the present tense. And so this is very, intensive, but especially for people who are up against this, you need to know that this is help you to see beyond the mask of sanity or through the lies. So, and once again, the cognitive incongruency or cognitive dissonance that it causes in the targets, the feeling of self-doubt, confusion, I don't know where, it is because of this language pattern and language structure that you, unless you know about it, don't understand the why of why it's making you feel such cognitive dissonance, such, self-doubt, and how this will cause a sort of time warp travel where you kind of feel that, you're out of your own reality. It's because there's this mix-up of tenses and emotional content of words which are strung together in illogical ways, and you're trying to process it. So oftentimes people become hypnotized because of the enigma or puzzle. And oftentimes then, if it's done with a charming or a seductive way, especially if it's, between different sexes, there is the feeling of being seduced or hypnotized or being swept off your feet or, inoculated by, there's words, songs about this. Doesn't Britney Spears do, it's the poison? I love what you do. Don't you know that you're toxic? Do you see the discongruency that it creates? You can listen to that Britney Spears song, I love what you do. Don't you know that it's toxic? Maybe it's just the term toxic, but I'm just giving you some popular cultural references so you can understand and kind of make sense of this, so you see what not to get tangled in. The whole object, of course, is not to get tangled in and not try to think like them, but I want you to understand the why of how you feel and why you have felt fire hosed. You can't communicate with them. You don't understand why they're coming back to you after they have done grave harm to you, and it's like they have totally disengaged from what they've done. It's just business as normal to hurt people, and then they come walking back up to your door like, you don't remember what you just did, and you're now treating me like you don't even remember, and you're having a difficult time connecting with that. Is because there's a wiring and firing in different parts of the brain which are not communicating in the brains of these individuals who are psychopathic as compared to the rest of the population. And I know it's pretty heavy material, but the takeaway, I want you to understand that this is just a tip of the iceberg, which is still being studied. It's a huge frontier. Kudos to the scientists who are conducting this information. There's another interesting study in Wisconsin, which I think I'm going to do in another video because I don't want it to be like too much for one video. But we can go on because I know a lot of people do like it. 2222. Okay, in a lack of emotion, and also. There's law enforcement, people, FBIs who have to know and study this. So they are very, 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 very well aware of this situation. And also, where's the other statement? Bear with me one moment. Let's just see here. Well, we can wrap it up. And, Hancock was the one, Wordsworth, this gentleman who is also a researcher, and sorry, I'm just trying to find it on this article that I was researching here. Okay, so I will, I just always want to make sure that, here it is. Text analysis software could be used to conduct a first pass, focusing the work for human investigators. He said, a lot of time analysts tell you they feel like they're drinking from a fire hose. So when you feel that way, you feel like you're just being blasted or bombarded. So there's a feeling, perhaps that is in the love bombing stage, where you just feel completely engulfed, enmeshed, overwhelmed, swept up. They're a life-changing person. When you feel this in the first encounter, I want you all to kind of reflect back in the privacy and silence of the portion of this video to see if you have ever felt that. To have felt disrespected or in this way where you feel kind of like obliterated or your boundaries were being violated. They just overwhelmed you. And see if you resonate with this feeling. And if you want to make a comment, I get it, I felt that, then you can just put that there. Or you can also, in your own words, describe how you felt around this person. Like, I couldn't think straight. I no longer, felt like a human. I felt used. This is a testimony to how profound it is. And also to understand that their speech oftentimes is a disconnect with what they're trying to prove with themselves. So if they're trying to come and talk to you, you'll find that oftentimes the tense of their words are a disconnect with what they're trying to communicate. So see if you can understand some of this disconnect in the language patterns that they use, because I think it'll prove to you very insightful and a good tool to how to protect yourself and not get entangled or ensnared. And then you'll see later on how this happens, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you learn other things about them and what they've done to other people, you'll begin to put the two and two together. It'll make sense. And then unequivocally, you will not need to mess around with this person. They will no longer take your time, energy, or consideration, and you won't be on the fence anymore. You'll know what is and what is not. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.